Good evening, captive audience. Don Anderson here. I hope you are doing well. Welcome to another wonderful Wednesday. Leslie rather, is on her way. She'll be here shortly. She's on making that drive home through California traffic. But I thought we'd go ahead and get this started since it's a little bit after 6. Feel free to hop in with any chats you have. I'd love to hear from you as I kind of walk through the goings on of the last few days. Of course, there are plenty of things to go over because there's always something going on in the wild, wild west. Or I guess the entire United States is behaving like the wild, wild west. Hey, Lori, glad to see you, or at least read you. Thank you for coming on board. So, what do we start with? I think a great place to start is always Portland because there's no insanity like Portland insanity. And I think one of the things that you'll be absolutely fascinated with is just some of the data around Portland, and then a look into the city council at Portland. So I just sent you a link where you can look at this Instagram and see what's going on with the businesses that are going to the city council and reporting just how atrocious things are in Portland. So let me start with this. As a ranking, the city of Portland now ranks 80th out of 81 major United States cities for business conditions. That's right, not dead last, but 80 out of 81 is almost last. And in the meantime, the city's mayor and the governor continue to try to persuade us that everything is copacetic. So, to get a feel for just how uncopacetic things really are, you'll never see this in the regular national news. So, you have to go to other locations in order to find that. But if you do, you'll be absolutely mortified by what you see with a city that's been taken over by the hardcore progressive left. So, that link I just sent you, let's give you a brief overview over what some of the things are that the business people are reporting that they're having to deal with in Portland. And this is a family channel, so I'll keep it as clean as I possibly can. On the one hand, it's absolutely heartbreaking. On the other hand, you want to laugh out loud, and you never know what to think in between. So this is just some of the things that these business people went to the county, to the city council to report. Imagine having a business where you're chasing down shoplifters daily. You have no time to do the paperwork to even report that these crimes are happening because you're spending so much time trying to earn your business chasing down shoplifters. Your employees, as well as yourself, have been spit on, you've been punched, a knife been pulled on you once, followed home a couple of times. This is just one business owner that came to the city council. I'm just reporting back what this person said. Once had to fight a guy off, had to cancel events because people having mental events right in front of his shop and scaring off customers, drug deals being done right in front of his shop, his credit cards and loans are maxed out, just trying to keep his business afloat. So that's just one individual. Another business individual reported that his foot traffic has dropped by 84%. So 65,000 customer visits over a 5-year period gone. Lost revenue and a 35% reduction in the number of jobs had been the result of that. 50% of his workforce is now on the dole because he had to reduce wages. So think of this from a governmental policy perspective. So those are people that now are essentially on welfare, and costing the rest of us taxpayers money because the state refuses to enforce the law. It's absolutely unbelievable. Another one was a restaurant owner. Let's see if we can get to him. I'll just a second here. We'll get Leslie on. I think she's just popped in. 1 second here.
Hello.
Get this thing to behave. I see you there, Leslie. We almost. Yes, she's here. Hey, Leslie, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm sorry to be
All right.
late. Life,
Nope, you're fine. Absolutely, we get it. I was mid opening rant, so I'll continue that, and then we'll come back. Okay.
Keep it going. Preach.
All right, mid rant. So we're on to Portland. So restaurant owner reported he had 5 break-ins. Police show up, arrest the guy, tells him he can hold him for 24 hours, 24 to 72 hours, and then release him back into the street. Can you imagine the psychological impact that would have on you? And this is occurring, by the way, on Broadway, which is the main drag in downtown Portland. There's streetcar racing, fights in the streets, drunken brawling, sexual assaults, scaring patrons and hospitalizing some of those patrons. Some of his bartenders have been robbed, punched, cussed every Friday and Saturday night. He's spending a fortune on private security. This is just a few of the businesses that made this report at the city council meeting, and you'll see that on that link. And if that's not enough, They opened up what they're calling the Oasis Day Camp, which is basically a homeless camp in downtown Portland. I mean, who does this, right? Right in your business district. And what's happening to the businesses around there? One of the business people reported the man pulled a machete on one of his staff members. Uh, Normalization of public drug use. Trash cans are constantly on fire, and trash cans are destroyed. Aggressive panhandling, public defecation, of which I personally have witnessed. Employee turnover from safety concerns. Yeah, I'm still washing my eyes out. You can't get in a Visine after you've seen something like that, sports fans. Snatch and grab robberies on a constant basis. Car driving into the front store of a robbery, just driving right through the front of the store to rob and then drive away. It's absolutely unbelievable what's happening in downtown Portland. And I think I might have reported this in the last time that we got together. There has been something like the data is showing like a 30% drop in foot traffic in downtown. When I drove through there a couple of weeks ago, I'm telling you, it felt more like 70%. The streets are empty. I mean, they've cleaned up most of those parts of the city that have nothing to do with the federal building. That part all looks nice and neat, but wow, there's nobody there. And the reason nobody's there is because the businesses have closed. And so there's no reason to go downtown and shop and hang out like you did in the old days. And one last thing I'd report, I had to go over there just yesterday and just driving the freeways, which they've largely cleaned up of all the trash and tents on the side of the road. What they haven't been able to do or gotten around to do is the vegetation just looks like hell. And anyone from the Northwest knows how beautiful the vegetation is. The side of the freeway is like, used to be like going to Bouchard Gardens, right? Green, beautiful, lush, flowers everywhere. There's dead grass. Things are overgrown, weeds everywhere. Even though they've cleaned it up, it still looks like hell if you have an eye for what it used to look like. This is what happens when you're a blue city with blue leadership. So let me stop there. And Leslie, any commentary? And of course,
well, I mean, yeah, I have a couple things that I want to respond to, but just quickly, when you talk about the like the vegetation and just sort of the natural landscaping, I remember this was in the 90s, maybe no, I guess it was like early 2000s. And I had a client in Seattle, a couple clients in Seattle. And so I would fly up there and I would, I was so, I mean, having grown up in the desert, right? I mean, you get off the plane and you're driving on the freeway, just like you said, gigantic azalea bushes, beautiful hydrangeas. I mean, everything is leafy and green and lush and gorgeous. Because of all the moisture and just, the way that the weather is up there. I mean, I can only, it's just kind of that whole deadening of the senses and and deadening of the mind, that happens when you're in an intentionally destructive situation, whether it's because people are sleeping, on the in embankments or, on the middle, what do you call that? The grassy areas, or whether it's just that they've turned off the water everywhere because because of vagrants, breaking it or doing whatever they're doing. It's just, it's just terrible. But I did actually read a couple things. One, I guess Andy Ngo, I'm always challenged with how to pronounce NGO, but anyway, I'm just going to call him No. Andy Ngo is apparently personally going after the people, the Antifa members who tried to kill him. I don't know. Hopefully people remember that, he was one of the only independent journalists back in, the summer of peaceful protests. What was that? 2020, 2019, maybe.
The peaceful protests. I love that.
Yeah. And so he was going around to Seattle and to Portland and, all these blue cities. I mean, I think it was mostly those two cities back then. And he was attacked and left for dead. And the authorities have done nothing about it. Just like you said, it's catch and release. It's a little, pat on the wrist. And so he's personally gone after these people for murder. And he's getting somewhere, but they have a whole game plan of how they evade any sort of responsibility, accountability. They have a whole fund that, pays for their bail and provides, funding for their masks and their signs and their T-shirts and, just all their destructive activities. So yeah, I mean, but then I also saw an article or a Substack actually by Seymour Hersh, who I read a lot. I really enjoy him and he's just so smart, and and just so well researched everything that he does. But he has a whole position where he feels like this Trump federal takeover, federal troops going into blue cities is unfounded. And it's like, this is a guy who was on the ground in Vietnam reporting on war crimes. He goes in with eyes open. He's not afraid to push against the grain, right? And report the truth. I just can't believe anybody would go to these cities and think anything other than this place is a hellhole that is completely what do you call that? Filled with anarchists.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not one that I think there's a room for that argument. I mean, I disagree with them, right? But I think there's room for that argument in that you don't want to do that too soon. We don't want to set a precedent for the feds having to come in and do this sort of thing. So I completely understand that. There is a point at which we want that to be a situation where the governors invite them in. However, when you have a circumstance where you have when you can demonstrate that we have definite insurrection, when your government of a state is working in cahoots with bad actors to destroy and not follow federal law, then you have to move in. And I think what's happening here is the administration is collecting that evidence, and once that evidence is in place, then you make your move. It's not unprecedented. This has happened multiple times. A number of Democrat presidents have done this. I mean, JFK had to do this twice. I think once for sure in Alabama. Eisenhower had to do it in the 50s in Arkansas. So it's not like this. Of course, Abraham Lincoln had to do it. So it's not like this is unprecedented and hasn't been done before. You just have to make sure that all the boxes are checked before you go in. So I think there's room for that discussion. But I think Portland's rapidly reaching the point where that case can no longer be made. And in fact, I just sent a link to you all, and this person's being defended by someone I happen to know. This is a conservative influencer, and this is another one of those fascinating cases. He was beat up just like Andy Ngo in public. Antifa mob beat him up. Then, to make it worse, the Portland police arrested him and charged him with a crime. And now the Portland police are being investigated on federal civil rights charges themselves. Now, once they learned that they were being investigated, they promptly released this influencer. But it's very clear to see that these police, and it looks like the lawyers on this case have documentation reflecting this. The police are communicating with members of Antifa, and they're allowing them to control the streets. They're communicating with them, telling them what to do, where to go, how not to get caught. So we have a case where a state is actively working against federal law. And you can't have a constitutional republic if the federal law does not trump state law. States don't get to decide which laws they're going to follow and which ones they don't. We had a civil war over precisely this issue.
Right.
That said, we want to be very careful about when we execute bringing those troops in. But I think it's becoming very clear to the general public that that line is being reached.
It's hard for me to imagine anyone not drawing that conclusion 5 years ago. I mean, why are we still having a discussion of whether or not it's okay to throw bricks into businesses and, taser innocent bystanders and beat up journalists and leave them for like, who thinks that is under control?
Yeah, and see, and here's the problem, and here would be the counter argument to that, because I 100% agree with you, right? But we're right now we have Republicans in power, but they're not going to be in power forever. If they set the precedent of moving in and doing that, what do you think the other side is going to do with that? I mean,
no.
we already showed us what they would do, by the way.
Of course.
We don't want to give them any more, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. So, Dawn, I'm so this is a regular theme with me. My computer's dying. So I'm going to plug it in
Okay.
while you continue, and I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Okay, no problem. Then I will continue what I do best, and that's talk. I can hear you out there laughing, audience. So that was, and so here's another interesting one. And this was actually about a week or so ago. I'll post a link for this, but basically, it's the White House hosts conservative influencers for an Antifa roundtable about the Portland disaster. And these are conservative reporters, not the national press, but conservative podcasters and influencers, people on the street reporting exactly what's going on in Portland. And I can't tell you how thrilled I was to see that this was happening. The press refuses to report on precisely what's happening in Portland. And I think what's happening here is the administration is building the case, as I was just mentioning earlier with Leslie, the need to bring in the national troops to take care of the situation in Portland. For sure, the feds have the right to go in and protect federal property, and that's going to happen. But the larger case is, when do you have the right to go into the rest of the city where the city refuses to enforce the law? And that remains to be seen. Yet one more area, just to show you just how out of control it is in Portland. There was a man recently charged with aiming a laser at helicopters flying near the federal building in Portland. Imagine how dangerous that is. They actually blinded temporarily those pilots, and they're flying over the city. This individual who did this, 35-year-old Miranda Mendoza is his name, admitted to law enforcement that he recently obtained high-powered laser and was aware of its potency. I can't imagine a more insane thing to do than that. But that is the nature of the type of people that we are dealing with. It's just the nature of who these people are. And it's a great lead in to another thing I wanted to report, and that was on Democrat mob violence. I'm not sure if you all have heard yet, but I'm going to get you a link. This was an article that's published in the National Review, and this is about the governor race in Virginia, where the attorney general tweeted wishes on the death of his opponent. He wished their spouses and their children were killed with a bullet to the head like Pol Pot and Hitler. This is literally what this individual is saying. And this is someone who is running for public office. This is like a national scandal of epic proportions. Let me just put this link in here. That someone would speak that way about an opponent in the United States of America is beyond the pale. He basically, let's see, blah, blah, blah. He sent text. He sent text saying that.
I was just going to say, can you read the tweet? Read it.
Yeah, here's what it said. He described a scenario in which Gilbert, the opponent, gets 2 bullets in the head, and he followed that with a wish that the Republican lawmakers' children die in their mother's arms. That's how explicit this tweet was. And this individual is running for office, and the governor of the Democratic Party, who's also running for office in that same state, won't condemn him. She'll essentially say he apologized and he steps away from that, but she's refusing to condemn him. And I should have found a tweet on her. She was being questioned on that in a debate recently. But that's the level to which the Democratic Party has stooped. And one other thing I have to say about this, because I think this is such a profound thought. Think of this. In Western Judeo civilization, we take it for granted that you don't kill your political opponents. Political assassination is normal, however, in the rest of the world. We're shocked by it because it just doesn't happen here very often. It's that rare. Think about in this country. When was the last time we had a political, besides the last case with Charlie Kirk, when is the last time a successful political assassination? We all remember John F. Kennedy. If you're old enough to be alive, you know exactly where you were when that happened. Martin Luther King, RFK, that was in 1968. Have there been any major political assassinations in this country since then? That's how rare it is. But to give you an idea how normal it is in the rest of the world, our southern neighbor, Mexico, in the last election in 2023, there were 20 political assassinations. Sports fans, that is normal. In the Judeo-Christian West, it's a rarity. But the less Christian we become, the more political assassination we're going to see. Because to the Christian, the act of murder is beyond the pale and the consequences are eternal. But
Mhm.
if you're a non-Christian, it's just another act necessary to get what you want. So the bottom line is, I would just say this: leave Christianity behind at your peril.
Wow. Wow. And again, you wonder like where are all the normal people? I mean, are they just not I mean, did they just not they just don't report this stuff on the other side. I mean, they're not doing a rundown of these are all the crummy things that the Democrats did, you know? I mean, even this Letitia James, I mean, people are starting to back away from her. You know, they're
Mhm.
starting to realize, "Oh, this is bad." Um,
It's so blatantly horrific. Now, in her case, the crime they're getting her on is mortgage fraud. Is that her?
yeah, yeah, mortgage fraud.
I can never keep
But
up. Yeah.
but it's mortgage fraud, but they're also looking at or probably, you know, are also assembling a case. So her deadbeat niece or grandniece who's
Mm.
been living in her property, Letitia James has been reporting rental income, which is how they found out that she had not been using this as her primary
Ah,
residence, but as a rental. So she was too dumb to not, you know, leave off rental. So she reported rental income on something that she's not supposed to have rental income on. Then come to find out that actually the her niece hasn't actually been paying rent. So she testified to this. I haven't been paying rent. So then they're wondering, well, then where's the rental income coming from? Like, did she just lie straight up about there's no rental income either? Or has she been using this as some sort of low income housing? She's been taking tax dollars to pay for the rent for her deadbeat druggy niece, whatever. I mean, everybody's looking at this going, I mean,
and
it's
see,
just like,
and this is the thing that's mind-numbing, about all this, Leslie. These aren't. This is run-of-the-mill people doing it. Yeah, it's bad, but this is the attorney general, right? The chief law enforcement officer of the state is doing these things. It's just you cannot have that. Uh, you just can't have it.
so speaking of stupid attorney generals, let's go back in the time machine and revisit our former attorney general, Kamala Harris,
Mm.
who during what was it like some interview recently within the last year, she talked about how she was a proud Glock owner and had shot it out on the shooting range. Well, California, Gavin Newsom has just passed a law that's supposed to be implemented, go into effect, I think in January 26, that will outlaw Glocks, semi-automatic pistols, the most popular gun in the United States, maybe the world. I don't know. Certainly the United States. I mean, the Glock 15, right? Probably only followed by the Glock 17. They've just outlawed it in California. I could
Yeah,
be fined $1,000, and if you're just for owning it. And the reason is because they're saying that it could easily be turned into an automatic weapon.
so I'm
But
sure all the criminals are going to rush to turn in their Glocks.
I mean, it's just the stupidest thing. So yeah, so it's like people are looking at it going. So the NRA is suing um, the uh, is it California Gun Owners Association, San Diego. Well, they have a group in San Diego, but California Gun Owners Association is a pack that I don't. You should donate to the California Gun Owners Association or any NRA, any Second Amendment, rights group. You should be involved. Um, but yeah, they're suing. I mean, but then that kind of ties back to remember the conversation that we had a couple weeks ago, how LA is being sued by the Department of Justice because they're not following their own rules in actually executing on all these CCW applications. 2,500 applications over the period of a year, and they've approved two. I mean, so
Yeah. See, the objective is to disarm the regular citizen and to make your life an absolute hellhole so they can get more control. That's 100. That's the progressive objective. The people at the top are not dumb. They know what the result of this will be. They put policies in place that will never affect them personally. And people who vote for this stuff generally, if you're living in in places like name your nice city. I was going to say what do you call it? The Palisades, but we won't be saying that anymore. You would not be affected by that stuff. But, of course, now they are, right? And then you have no
Yeah.
state of mind.
I mean, I feel like, California is, bring your wacky and backwards and destructive idea and we're in. I mean, that just feels like what California has become. I mean, we are a laughing stock.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here is, I think, some good news though, in terms of what could be coming over the horizon. So the Supreme Court is in deliberations or is hearing arguments on the Civil Rights Act of 1965 and reversing that portion of the act that has been used by the Mandarin states around positioning blacks to have seats that are essentially black seats. So that's everywhere else in law over the last 50 years. Uh, we've made every effort to be blind to race. And now it's finally come around to this gerrymandering. And it looks like there is, given the questions and the responses by the Supreme Court, looks like there's a really strong likelihood that that's going to be reversed. If that is reversed, we're looking at about 19 to 20 seats that will instantly go from Democrat to Republican by the next election cycle. That is earth-shattering.
I have no other words. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so when are they going to make their decision on that?
So they don't give a date on when they're going to do that. They're they're hearing arguments now. They're hearing oral arguments. So I think you can expect that to happen sometime in the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
But that will be absolutely huge. And you think about the impact that would have in most of the states. I mean, a ton of red states are going to move 1 to 2, in some cases 3 or 4 seats as a result of rejiggering things anyway.
Mm-hmm.
This by itself is going to result in about 19 seat shift. We're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a 27 seat shift, which would pretty much guarantee Republican dominance in the House for it could be a generation, certainly the next election cycle. And then when you layer on the fact that at this upcoming census, when we take an actual count without all the illegals here, number one, and number two, if the administration gets its way, which I think the argument certainly can be made, that for the purposes of the Electoral College, non-citizens should not count. I mean, the census should be separate from those who are eligible to count for the Electoral College. You do that, and how many seats will result from that? Considering the fact that we probably have somewhere in the neighborhood, a minimum of 20 million people roaming around,
right?
Maybe 30 million, which would be 30 million, be almost what the size of California walking around. That would be earth shattering, and that would pretty much end the party as we know it. So, not to mention the fact that we are finally learning how to watch elections and keep them from cheating. All of those things, I think, bode very positive for the entire United States and for those of us trapped on the West Coast. I think things are closer than we think. There was protests outside of the federal building, just to give you a case in point, and there were, for the first time ever, and this happened since the national troops have come in, there were counter protests, and there were conservatives outside. You never saw that in 100 days of protesting. I mean, 100 days in a row, you never saw anybody else out there. And the reason you didn't see them out there was because they were afraid for their lives.
Yeah.
Well, now they're out there. So what I would say is that there are a ton of, who call them normies, who live in these places, and they don't believe in this, but they're trying to stay alive. And so you don't see. So as they begin to feel empowered that help is on the way, we'll hear more from them. And they're not going to keep voting for this stuff. I just don't think they will.
Well, if we actually have a real election, if the voter rolls are clean if we go back to hand counting ballots, handwritten ballots, if we have a real honest election, I do think that things will turn. I really do. Um, and people will start to feel, and people on the conservative side will start to feel empowered because they're going to look around and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm not
Right.
alone." You know,
Yeah.
and you know, maybe we don't win everything, but we're at 45% instead of 20. You know,
Sure.
whatever. It's just it's going to create some momentum and encourage people.
Well, a Democrat city used to not be a hellhole, though. And that's the other thing. I mean, what's happened is the most extreme lunatics have taken over these places.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you take a look at places like Portland and Chicago, where they literally will not enforce the law. Or Lady Justice is, she holds the balance. It ain't in balance. It's completely out of whack, right? The hand is on the scale of one side. When you are watching Antifa mobsters burn and throw things down, and then you see a conservative podcaster or reporter simply reporting who gets beaten up. I'm not sure if you saw the one with the woman who got a black eye. They almost beat her to death. Um, you know,
it's hard
then
to
you
keep up, honestly, Don. I mean, it's
no,
just
it
it's like
is
how much can you watch before you're like, got it? It's
right.
terrible.
Right. No, and that's exactly right. Where the government is your enemy. I'm just putting myself in the shoes. And I know that neighborhood really well where that protest is happening. That's a beautiful, neat neighborhood. It would be a very cool, if you were like in your 30s, that'd be your 20s, that'd be like a really cool place to live. I used to hang out there all the time when I was young. And to
Mm,
think that 100 nights in a sleep, 100 nights in a row, you got no sleep because there's noise 24/7. You try to drive home, the streets are blocked and barricaded. You got to run the gauntlet of like of blue hair freaks, screaming, throwing, cursing, all of that just to get to your apartment or house. It's like I can't even imagine. And it's been like that 100 days in a row. And you trying to tell me that law enforcement, the most basic job that law enforcement does is to take care of the citizens, is not taking care of that? That is on purpose. They're in the pocket of Antifa at the
yeah,
top. I'm not blaming the cops on the street, although I think what's happened is those cops who went into the business to do the job the right way, you leave a place like Portland. You don't stay
yeah,
here. They've transferred out. They
yeah,
retired early. They quit and
yeah,
done some of the profession. They moved to some other jurisdiction where there's a conservative population. And so now what you got is they've recruited people who think like them. So you've got an entire department um, that's that's infected. The good ones are just like, well, I'm just counting the days to retirement, and the
yeah,
bad ones are running wild. And clearly, the chief of police is in cahoots with them.
yeah. Um, can we change gears a little bit?
We can, yeah.
Okay, so I saw a really cool article about ivermectin. And, you know,
Hmm.
we all know ivermectin because of COVID, right? I mean, it's been, you know, saving hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives in third
Are you
world
trying to give us
countries.
horse medicine? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. And and they have so yeah, people have been taking this forever. We all know that, right? Old news. And I guess they just released a study that well, and now they're looking at ivermectin for cancer, curing cancer.
Wow.
And I know there's been a lot of studies out there, but one of them that just kind of broke through was about an oral, no, it was a nasal spray that they put into mice, and it has um, basically killed off, you know, 70% of the cancer cells that these little mice, you know, had in their bodies.
Wow.
And I mean, you probably still have friends in pharma. I have, you know, lots of friends in pharma who run clinical trials and are conservative and have to keep their heads down and their mouth shut. But now that RFK Jr. has released it, what is it like $300 million or some huge and great huge amount of money for repurposing drugs, for drug trials, for repurposing these drugs. I I bet you there is a huge career opportunity for anybody who want to jump away from the Jansens, jump away from the Mercks, from the Modernas, all the, you know, all those gross companies, and actually get into some of these more nimble, aggressive companies that are interested in, finding uses for repurposed off patent drugs. I think there's a
Mhm.
tremendous career opportunity, a tremendous money making opportunity, and it's going to be really good for all of us.
Mhm. Oh,
What do you think?
you have to, yeah. And I'm just guessing what's been going on here is because there's no one holds a patent on something like ivermectin, they
Yeah,
can't make a fortune on it. So they've
right.
suppressed the research on it so they can keep making money on these other things that they're introducing into the market where there's no patent. Um, that would not
Sure.
surprise me one bit.
Well, of course. I mean, it's a big company is not going to figure out how to repurpose their own drugs, right? They're going to think of something new, and they're going to, even if they're studying the exact same thing, right? Even if their patented drug was being used for treatment A, as
Mhm,
soon as it goes off patent, they're going to then invest in treatment B to
mhm,
go after the exact same thing, because the truth is they don't actually fix any of the problems. So there still is a problem, right?
mhm,
It's actually probably been, elevated. It's more pervasive. So now they need patent B because, well, first of all, you've got all these crummy side effects. So now you're not just, drunk and stupid, but you're also fat, and then you are hard of hearing. You know what I mean? Like all the different
right.
things,
Mhm,
it just compounds, compounds, compounds.
mhm,
So, I mean, again, when I said a fortune to be made, I think it's going to be incremental.
mhm,
I mean, Tylenols are not very expensive, right?
mhm,
But
right.
it's pretty
Yeah,
profitable. So
yeah.
you start, and there is a fortune, at least a figurative fortune, in doing good work,
Mhm.
helping humanity.
Yeah, my guess is that too many of these people have permeated government with their lobbyists, and have been able to buy influence and probably suppress research
Yeah.
or cause that research to be directed in the areas that are more profitable for them, because chasing things like old drugs where where they don't hold the patent is just not profitable to them. And it's terrible to think that human beings would be that evil, but I've been on the planet long enough to know better than to think that. We could probably
Yeah.
end it that way.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we all know better that, people, unfortunately, we've built a society where, corruption and deceit have been rewarded. And, hopefully that's being dismantled. I see it being dismantled,
Yeah.
at least.
Mhm. Oh yeah, and these are the reasons why it goes back to the founding of the country. One of the things that made these founders unique, as composed, let's say, compared to the French Revolution, which was happening at the same time, was there was a realization with the founding of the U.S. Constitution of the limitations of man. They wrote a document with the Christian realization that man is not perfectible, and to
Mhm.
try to and therefore let's build something to minimize his imperfections, to minimize his ability to destroy, if you will. And as
Mhm.
a result, we have this constitution where power is dispersed in as many different places as possible, because we know what man will do is seek to get as much power as they can to destroy as many people as they can. Now, that's not a fix, but it does limit the amount of destruction you can do. Whereas in the French Revolution, the objective was, hey, man is perfectible.
Mhm.
We have eliminated God. We can remake God. We are God, and we see what the result of that was. Um, and to the degree that we allow ourselves to get big and bloated, the worst among us are the ones who gravitate to government. I mean, I think this is interesting. This is a great conversation. Think about the kinds of people who we see in office right now.
Yeah.
They look unhinged. You can tell. You can look at their faces and there's like something wrong with them. And there is something wrong with them, because the kinds of people who seek power, the kinds of people who rise to the top in most of these organizations, are not the kinds of people that they're willing to do things that a normal person won't do. And I can't
Right.
remember the famous economist who came to that conclusion. It was Friedrich Hayek, who wrote a book on this, who was in Germany in the 30s. So he knows a thing or two about power, by the way. And he wrote this book, um, The Road to Serfdom. And there's a
Mm.
chapter in that book that speaks specifically about that. It's a very dry economist book, but this one chapter I just found amazing. And that chapter asked the question, why is it that the worst among us wind up at the top of the food chain all the time? And we speak to that rare benevolent dictator, and they're unusual because they're so rare.
Yeah.
Well, the reason is because to get to the top of the pyramid, you have to be willing to do things a moral person wouldn't do. And you think to yourself, so what kinds of things did Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, Castro, they didn't just appear in office one day. They
Oh,
wiped out a whole fleet of people to get there. So that's why. So every government's open to that sort of thing. The only way that you can minimize the damage, therefore, is to disperse the power as much as possible. And that, I think, is the brilliance of the founding of the United States. They recognize that. So we got the three branches, we got 50 different states. I mean, it's very hard to put yourself in the position where you are truly a dictator in this country. It's not to say it's impossible, but it's difficult.
well, it is difficult. It takes years and years of organization and building, building the structure. And that's what's happened is that yes, we have the branches of government, we have the framework, a constitutional framework, but then they've weaved in all the bureaucracy, all the branches and the departments and the
Sure.
czars of this and the red tape of this that is now dictating our lives.
Mhm.
And that took a long time to do.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. But one thing about the radical left, they never give up. And hence the development of the unelected state, the unelected bureaucrats. Think of the EPA, FBI, CIA. You name all these organizations that are unelected, and those people, just because a politician changes every 4 years, they
Yeah.
don't change,
Right.
right? And that's the if we're not careful, that's the weakness. Laws should not be passed by unelected folks because they're not accountable to the citizens. And
Right.
that's one of the things that I think it was a Chevron case that got reversed a few years ago, maybe a year or two ago. That was one of the huge wins that this administration's had.
Yes.
Start rolling back the power of the unelected state
And term limits.
and term limits someday. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't help but see this comment from Lori here about when she worked in cardiology. Every time they would get close to the cost dropping for a new drug, they would come out with another one to keep the cost high. I,
Right.
all I have to say, Lori, is yep.
Yep.
There's my in-depth response to your
Yeah.
comment. Yep,
Yeah.
that's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, my cousin's a nurse and, I'll ask her about things and, she's like, you know, just put some Bactine on it. Like they just kind of like if you've been around healthcare long enough, you
Uh-huh.
see the bullshit. It's like, okay, let's just bring it back to like, did you wash your infected toe, or are why did you stick your finger there? I mean, it's like common sense.
Call me crazy, but here's the rabbit hole I've been going down recently. Now, this is just my own personal experience. This is not any data. This is me, personal experience, observation. I think that um, uh, that the food and drug industry has been slowly killing us, not on purpose, but to make a profit. You put all kinds of dyes in food so they look more attractive. You make foods they last longer on the shelf, so you put stuff in them so that they last longer, which brings more profitability because it doesn't spoil. You make the fruit look beautiful. It's not like it would look in nature, but you put all this stuff on it, all this untested stuff, and that stuff is probably harmful to us because it's not found in nature. Now, again, I know there's lots of research being done on this stuff. This is just me just thinking out loud. So, my suspicion is that if we would stop eating things that were not made by God and start eating things that were only made by God, I suspect that a lot of the health problems we have would gradually go away. I'm just fiddling with this, right? But I suspect that, and then when you go to the doctor, they're not trained in nutrition. They just aren't. They're trained in giving you drugs, which are man made. So I suspect that if we began to move away from man made stuff and start putting God-made stuff in our bodies, a lot of these health issues would begin to go away. So there's just my 50 cents. And I've been experimenting with this on myself personally for the last 3 months. And I can tell you, for those of you who might be thinking about this sort of thing or trying it, I cannot tell you how different I feel. I feel like 25 years went off my body. I'm not kidding you. And that has nothing to do with exercise. You need exercise too, but it's not exercise. It's what we're eating.
I feel like this was uncharacteristically forgiving of you when you said, I'm not saying they mean to poison us. I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose. That's not your vibe, Don.
I
Usually
know, I know.
you're looking for the nefarious actor. And I am going to go contrarian on you because normally I'm looking for like the little, the goodness. I think they are doing it on purpose because there's no way that you would invent coloring for food unless you were trying to cover up rotten food. If something is fresh, it looks fresh. If something is good for you, it looks delicious to eat. That's why God made all the beautiful colors of the foods. That's how you know if a pepper is ripe. You know a melon is ripe because you smell it and it smells delicious. You know meat is bad because you smell it and it smells disgusting. So when to say that, oh, I don't think they're doing it on purpose. Well, of course they are. I mean,
I'm trying to be generous, Leslie.
I know. Knock it off. I don't know who you are. Yeah.
As we say at home, I can't. You ain't wrong. I mean, look at international data like life expectancy in the West. Life expectancy, not life expectancy, fertility rate. We all know it takes 2.1 in order to maintain a population. We're down in the West to somewhere around 1.4, 1.3. The United States is higher than most, and we're only like at 1.7 or 8. You look at countries like Japan and South Korea, they're flirting around with 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all know that there are those in the radical left who think that the presence of man on the planet is a cancer. One of them, I think Bill Gates himself has stated that the population of the earth should be about 4 billion. So in other words, he's saying like 3 billion of you need to go away.
Yeah. And if they could just stick to their own little tribes and eliminate themselves, that would be one thing. The problem is when they reach into our lives and try to, manipulate us and throw the chemicals into our food and, tell us that we can't be in charge of our own healthcare and things like that.
Yeah. So no, I do think there is a cadre of people, think of the Davos crowd out of Brussels, who do think that's good. That's one of the reasons why we have, I think I call it, I did write around on this recently, pantheistic environmentalism, where the environment is your God.
Yes.
And therefore, people are a cancer on the earth. Therefore, we need to eliminate people.
Right.
And so you see things like if we get rid of, you take a country like Canada, whose its old economy is based on natural resources, and you tell them that you can't use those natural resources. Well, what are you doing to the population? Well, if you can't get jobs when you're young, then you're probably not going to get married, or you're going to get married later. And if you do get married, you're going to have 1 kid. And we see that happening throughout the West. And I do suspect that is the objective for a number of these individuals.
Yeah. Well, and it's, and besides the ones who are actually pulling the strings and, being evil, it's a mentality that's almost kind of like a sense of pride. I think some people are like, well, I'm not going to bring somebody into this world because I just could never do that because, I care so much and this world is so rotten. And, I don't know. It kind of goes back to maybe that liberal speak that we were talking about last week, Don, that you and I both kind of fell into, which is like, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm a social liberal, right? Where you really are negating yourself. If you have that sort of belief system, right? It's if you talk it all the way through, it doesn't actually work. You kind of like cancel yourself out. And it's the same thing with the I am so virtuous that I wouldn't possibly bring another human into this world because, and it's like,
Yeah.
who wants to live in the jungle? Nobody wants to live in the jungle. We all like house cats. We all like dogs that walk on our feet. We don't want the wild, wild west, right? I mean, do you like indoor plumbing? Do you like electricity? Like, come on, get with civilization. Like, be part of the solution. Yeah, there's crummy things out there. That's the nature of our fallen world. But be part of the goodness and the light.
Yeah.
And raise your family right.
See, a lot of that is two things. Like it's virtues, is the obvious virtue signaling that they do by doing that sort of thing. But it's also, at next level, it's the ultimate in selfishness. What they really want to do is just do what they want to do. Because
Yeah.
let's face it, having a kid is the biggest sacrifice you'll ever make. I
Yeah.
mean, they are your life for whatever that period of time that they're under your roof. And then when they leave your roof, you're still worried about them. So, that's what that is. And yet, the most virtuous, difficult, challenging, and best thing you can do for the planet is to raise a virtuous human being. If you raise a virtuous human being, think of how many other people that they will positively influence.
Right.
That is a true challenge, and that requires work. People who now obviously not everyone can do that, but most people can. And for those who avoid it when they could, they're missing out on perhaps two things: the most rewarding thing they will ever do in this life for themselves, and the most rewarding thing we'll do for the rest of the planet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and if you really think that you're making a difference, by the decision to not contribute, I mean, uh, just try to add to the goodness. Why don't you raise people that, I mean, if nothing else, if you have, don't you want to raise people that have your own morals and your own values and your life, your life goals? I mean, is it, I don't know. It feels incredible. It feels nihilistic. It feels lazy. It's sad.
Well, it's definitely those things. Because let's face it, it's not glamorous having kids. You're going to be getting up at 2 in the morning and changing those diapers and finding daycare and all the other things that go along with that, cleaning house and blah blah blah. Right? Ain't nothing glamorous about it. However, like with most things that are really worth doing, if you take something that I'll just say you something from the sports world, if you see that boxer putting on the heavyweight title belt, that looks all glamorous and glorious. What you're not seeing are those 4 o'clock in the morning wake up calls and those 5 o'clock in the morning runs where they're pulling a truck, in the middle of the street in some nasty ring in South Philadelphia. You're not seeing any of that. But the best things in life always come from, I call it doing the grind, right? You got to do the grind before you get the glory, right?
Yeah, the reps and sets.
That's how it works. Well, my friend, we have blown through another 55 minutes in our heartbeat. Any closing thoughts on your part?
Well, I just want to thank, praise God for the release of the hostages in Israeli hostages and the Palestinian hostages. I mean, it's just terrible and sad on both sides. Bad people do bad things, but there's a lot of good people that were caught up in it, and I really, really hope that that the world is heading in a new direction.
Well,
And I praise God for where we are, the release.
I would absolutely echo your thoughts when you think about where we were as recently as a year ago. We were worried to death that the current administration was going to stay in power, and how long could the world even continue to exist? And to have what's happened in the last 9 months is nothing short of a miracle, and we ought to be thankful for that and appreciative of the fact that things are going in the right direction. So, amen to all of that. Whoop whoop.
Yeah.
All right, everybody out there, thank you all so much. Leslie, it's always a pleasure. And we will see you all next week.
All right. Bye, everyone.
USA.